Hello folks, Halcylion here. Welcome to the final chapter of Corporate Reports. 18 episodes, 6 months, 14 in-game years and 1,000 hours of editing later, Harald's story has come to an end. But just because my ultimate goal has been achieved and the world's been united under my banner does not mean my work is done. For a while I'll still be busy settling accounts and tying up loose ends before my corporation can stop publishing its financial reports. So without further ado, let's roll the intro one last time. A new era dawns over Calradia. I've done my best to ensure that this will be an era of peace, and I shall steer things in that direction, but when I'm gone, despite my efforts, the continent is still prone to falling into chaos if my successors choose to give in to greed instead of following my vision. But I'm still alive and kicking, so for now, my duty is to ensure that each and every one of my vassals is properly rewarded for their service, among a few other issues. The first of these issues is taking a look at the character page to see who among us needs their skills developed. I was the first on that list, with 2 perks becoming available, one in archery, allowing my arrows to better pierce enemy armor, and another one in athletics that would improve my, persuasion chance. I failed to see the correlation, but my guess is that when you have a 6-pack, everyone likes you just a little bit more. Some of my clanmates were also in need of skill development and I helped whoever I could, but not all of them were present for that. Some were appointed governors, while others led their own parties, and I needed to take them into my personal retinue if I were to shape their skills to suit the needs of our clan. So I formed an army to summon my younger siblings and then set course towards Territorial Castle in order to remove Darim from his position as governor and then take him with me. On my way towards that castle, I spotted some rebels and I tried catching up to them as I wanted to give them a job within my organization, but as it turns out, a warband of 260 horsemen is rather slow, so I'd need to station some of my men into a garrison. But since there's fewer people in my party, that also means we can't manage too many horses, so I had to stable a few into Seonon, and since I have fewer horses, I can't carry all my luggage, so I had to stash some of it in the city as well. But even so, my party's movement was hindered from all the prisoners I was carrying, so they had to be let go as well. Some of them offered to join me, and then they were assigned to the garrison of Uthalim Castle, while the rest were sold to the ransom broker. Throughout this period of micromanagement, I also ran into Caladog and some of his generals, and since they couldn't be persuaded to join, I crushed their warbands and immediately set them free, in order to build positive relations with their clan. There's always the possibility for Caladog to perish and the leadership of the Battanian rebellion to be given to another clan, which leaves Fengrufendok in a position to be recruited into my corporation, and that would suit me just fine, seeing how this is one of the biggest clans in Calradia. At some point I also came across Serandon, the leader of a prominent Imperial family, now fighting for the Battanians, and as you can expect, I made him an offer he couldn't refuse. And I mean that in a literal sense, because my persuasion attempts had 100% success rate, by virtue of the athletics perk I unlocked earlier. He joined, but he's poor as dirt and I can't give him any of my fiefs, at least not yet, so I asked him what would it take for us to seal the deal. Only 37k, not bad. Shortly thereafter I also met Iyalas, a Battanian lord of Aserai origin, who met the same fate, albeit with a few minor differences. Because I took his lands by force when he was fighting for the Sultanate, he's not my biggest fan and my first persuasion attempt failed, but all my other attempts had a 100% chance of success. So he eventually accepted, but he demanded 190,000 dinars. Well, I have an endless supply of gold. This is a small price to pay. Throughout today's chapter, I met many more lords who were made the same offer. Those who were destitute have been given money, and the few who were financially stable were given lands to rule in my name. One of those guys held my companion Zandina in his custody and was offered nearly 300k for her release and his loyalty. My journey eventually took me to Marunath, where I surprisingly found Monchug Khan. Since he's a faction leader, he cannot be recruited, but we talked nonetheless, and out of curiosity I asked how much would it take for us to make peace. He wants 3.5 million dinars, what a joker. I can't wait to meet him on a battlefield and introduce him to my javelins, or rather, the other way around. Anyway, nothing I can do about him now, even though he's in a city filled to the brim with my soldiers. For some reason, honor prevents me from ordering my own men to arrest this guy. After I left Maronath, my younger brother caught up to me and joined my army, but I could not station his soldiers anywhere close, so together we rode north towards Revel. We were supposed to head straight into town, but seeing this bandit infestation triggered an aggressive response within me, so I had to engage them in battle. The fights were nothing special. My 100 riders made short work of the outlaws while I ran them over with my horse. Those were the lucky ones who survived and would be imprisoned to be ransomed in town. The others were not as lucky. After these bandits were crushed, the captives we liberated from them willingly joined my party and found themselves stationed in Revel along Farok's troops. Who is Farok, you may wonder? Well, he doesn't know who I am either, so we're even. He's my younger brother, but apparently he doesn't know that and he has to ask for my name. Anyway, everything went according to plan. I took his troops, stationed them in the city, dismissed him from the army, disbanded his party, and then waited for him to go into town, after which he was taken into my own warband. It did not take long for my sister to reach the army and go through the same process, and after these two were added to my party, I developed their skills and then made sure to equip them with the best gear money could buy, because I was planning to send them out with their own detachment of horsemen. However, I did not want to give them the Varcheg cavalry because they lacked the experience needed to lead such expensive troops, so my next step was making my way towards the eastern steppe and liberate my low-tier cavalry from the garrisons of fiefs I owned in that region. This was a lengthy process that I shan't talk about, but it is important to note that I've invested lots of money into the development of each of the fiefs I passed through. It's only fair given the fact that I receive 45,000 dinars in tax revenue on a daily basis. And look at it this way, the more I develop this country, the richer it gets. The richer it gets, the more money I make. And prosperity is what keeps the citizens happy and loyal to me. It's a shame no politicians think like this though. They're instead interested in embezzling funds, earning petty bribes and running the country down the toilet just for a few extra bucks in the short run, but I don't blame them. Their tiny skull sponges are incapable of long-term planning, or anything else for that matter, but luckily for the population of Calradia, this vermin has been disposed of and I am now in charge. And I shall bless this country with my fair but iron-fisted rule. But once again I'm rambling off the future instead of focusing on the present, so let's get back to the task at hand. So, my plan was to round up the cavalry into my own party, and once it was full, I would send off my two siblings and one of my companions to lead their own patrols. But my path took me to Mizea, which looked like this. That's a lot of Khazad generals who are taking refuge within the Lord's Hall here, and while some of them can be recruited to my faction, the mercenaries cannot break their contract while I'm at war with their employers. Of all my years in Calradia, this was the strangest thing I've ever witnessed. Anyway, I recruited all I could and then it was time to move on to establishing my clan patrols. But after a while I realized I was not yet ready to do that because my siblings were given focus points into smithing, which in turn would help them quickly develop their other skills, so I needed to take them to the forge. The patrols have been thrown on the back burner for the time being. Let's deal with this issue first. Before we proceed, you know how smithing goes. You spend your energy to craft, and then it must be replenished by resting in town. Resting takes time. So in order to make the most out of that time, I also assembled a council meeting with some of my vassals. For now I only called those who hold a lot of land for reasons that I will explain when the time comes. If you're starting to feel this is getting chaotic, your instincts are correct. This was chaotic. I started doing one thing and in the middle of doing that I realized that there's something else that needs to be done, and while doing something else, I remembered of another thing, so I jumped to that. But all this chaos rests on my shoulders and it's not affecting the citizens of Calradia too much. So as I've said, I formed an army and I called important landowners to me. Tynops, Arkor, Nikasor, Ingalther and everyone else was available to join me. Some were busy marching in an army led by Garios, and others were simply resting inside their cities and would not answer my call. By the way, this may feel like an irrelevant detail, but at first, these lords were marching in Ragea's army, and I forced it to disband. Doing so hurt my relations with a lot of them. But I was foolish and I didn't call them all to me immediately, instead waiting for just a little bit for them to go their separate ways. That small time frame was all it took for Garios to form his own army, and because I didn't want to damage my standings any further, I let that army be for a while. You know, it's not that important, just something to keep in mind. At the very least, the lords I needed most were free to join the council meeting. Okay, so from here I had two new priorities. power level my siblings through smithing, and wait for these lords to show up. The best place for both of these things is in the city of Amitatis, which rests in the center of the continent, because if I wait here, no matter what corner of the world my vassals find themselves in, it will be easy for them to reach me. Seonon used to be the capital of my corporation, but now that I own the entire world, I feel I should move the capital to Amitatis and rebrand Seonon as Halcorp HQ, since that's where I keep most of my assets. But while I was heading over to the new capital, I was notified of an ongoing conspiracy led by Istiana. She wanted me to restore the Empire some time ago, and even though that's exactly what I've done, she's upset I didn't do it her own way. Boo-hoo, Istiana, cry me a river. The world's been united under one ruler. I told you I'd get this done. Whether I call it an empire or not is irrelevant. But she threw a tantrum and somehow managed to rebuild the Northern Empire with some Tier 0 clans. A bunch of nobodies who think they can challenge my authority. Funny enough, when I checked the diplomacy page, I noticed that the Northern Empire is led by Arcor. But this feller is a vassal of mine, so there's a few inaccuracies in both the diplomacy page and the encyclopedia. Well, this Northern Empire is no threat to me. They have 230 soldiers and no way to replenish their troops, so it's only a matter of time before they fade back into obscurity. This brief interruption is yet another example of the chaotic situation I find myself in. Anyway, I reached Amitatis, forged some javelins, and my siblings leveled up, so I taught them all I could about leadership and stewardship to develop them into competent military generals, and that was just after one smithing session. And then we had to wait for about a day, during which a few of my vassals showed up. And so the time has come to explain exactly what I want to do with these lords and their lands. You see, that depends on several factors, including the amount of fiefs they own. I can't let one of my vassals hold 5 cities while others have nothing. I need to share these lands in a fair manner, and I possess the financial resources to get this done. Before we talk details, let's discuss how I envisioned sharing this continent with my subsidiaries. First and foremost, I ensured that my vassals would only hold territory in their country of origin. Kuzeits would manage the steppe, Vlandians would stay in Vlandia, the Aserai would protect the south, and the territories of the former empire shall be ruled by those who called themselves emperors. I absolutely love cultural diversity, and the only way to preserve it is to allow each culture to flourish in its own environment, because if you force them all to mix, all you'll have left in a few decades is a mishmash that borrows a few elements from each culture while retaining none of their origins or history. Most in my position would try to create an imperialist, totalitarian, homogeneous culture that obliterates the identity of every group it conquers, but I wish nothing of the sort. I want people all over Calradia to be proud of their heritage and pay homage to their ancestors, while at the same time putting an end to the ceaseless bickering and petty squabbles they seem so fond of, and instead come together to create a better world for future generations. And most importantly, pay their taxes and make me money in the meantime. But we're beginning to tread into the philosophical realm, so let's snap out of it and get back to the main subject. So the world shall be shared according to these principles. First, each clan goes back home. They're easier to organize this way. And secondly, not all of my vassals are equal as such. The territory they'll manage in my name depends on several factors. The size of their clan, their level of wealth, the circumstances of their recruitment, and the service they provided throughout my campaign. To make things simple, I placed all of them into 3 categories. Category number 1 and the most prevalent is called lower management, and clans placed into this division will only hold 1 castle. Anything more than that is too much responsibility for these small clans. Category number 2 is reserved for large clans who will be given 1 town and at least 1 castle. I call this upper management. And the third category is comprised of special cases, clans that receive preferential treatment due to their loyal service or exemplary performance during the war. But of course I did not give everything to my vassals. I kept most of the fiefs for myself, as payment for successfully privatizing world peace. In time, my loyal vassals would get even more territory, but for now, I'll be the one collecting most taxes from this continent. Now that you know the 2 principles upon which I reshaped the world, let's give a few examples. Because Tassinor was the first to arrive into my army, let us judge what position he qualifies for, based on the factors listed earlier. Factor number 1 is clan size. Unfortunately, Tassinor is lacking in this department as his clan only has 2 members. Factor number 2 is his level of wealth. Well, he isn't broke, but 360,000 is a rather small amount of money for a lord. As for the third factor, the circumstances of his recruitment, let us remember how he joined. At the end of chapter 5, Tassignor's castle was being sieged by the Khuzaits, but before they took it, I swooped in and offered to buy this fort from him. And instead of losing everything he ever had, he got a big pile of money. Shortly thereafter he was invited into the corp, and since then, he was voted to receive quite a few fiefs. Did he do anything spectacular to deserve those fiefs? I mean, he probably took part in a few battles, but I don't recall this guy playing a major role throughout my campaign. The service he provided was factor number 4, by the way, and with all these factors considered, it is fair to say that Lord Tassignior only qualifies for a lower management position within my organization. As such, he was allowed to keep 1 castle, and the rest of his lands were taken. I believe 3 million dinars to be fair compensation for all that territory he's been relieved of. Still, he should be grateful because before joining my corporation, he was a nobody with 2,000 dinars to his name and a castle that he would have lost if not for my intervention. Now he's a millionaire whose estates are not at risk of being taken by his rivals. After dealing with Tassignior, I spent a lot more time in Amitatis, waiting for vassals to arrive to me, and smithing when my companion's energy replenished. Nicassor arrived not long after, and he was in the same situation as Tassignior. Small clan, a lot of land, was allowed to keep 1 castle and the rest of his land was purchased from him. This time with the javelins we've crafted. But I have 44 clans under my banner, so I won't waste time talking about every one of those who were assigned to a lower management position. The upper management and special cases have a bigger role to play during this period of post-war land administration, so let's talk about them instead. My initial plan was to have no more than 2 big clans in charge of each territory. As an example, Vlandia's upper management will consist of clans De Aromanque and De Courtin, led by Calatilde and Ingalthur respectively. Those are the largest clans and therefore they're qualified for this level of responsibility. Calatilde was allowed to keep her hometown, Yakulan, and in addition to that she received the nearby castle of Hongard. Ingalthur was supposed to rule Provend and Drapand Castle, but he couldn't afford to purchase the second one, so I had to give him some javelins, wait for him to sell them to the collector, and then he finally got the castle as well. Moving on to the Nahasa Desert, I did not have a whole lot of Aserai vassals to choose from, so the upper management was shared between Banu Atij and the Saranid clan. The former have been placed on the eastern border of the desert, in the city of Husn Folk and the nearby castle of Shibal Zumr, while the latter shall patrol the desert's western border from Tubilis to Kiyaz to Ain Balik Castle. None of those clans are very large, but that could be said about all of the Aserai clans. They all lost a lot of people in these senseless wars. Moving eastward, the steppes capital of Makeb has been given to the Khergit clan, as well as the nearby castle of Usek and Tsepesh. Clan Tigrit has also been assigned to the Khuzait upper management, ruling Baltakand and Kaisar Castle, but another Khuzait vassal got a city in the steppe. Akrum was a special case because under normal circumstances, he'd only be given a castle, but since he brought the city of Odok into the fold, he was allowed to keep it. The Empire was my favorite territory to share. As you can expect, the Imperial High Command was comprised of the 3 former emperors. Garios was given dominion over the southwestern territories of Ortygia, Garantor, and Oristocoris. Arcor was sent to rule Amprella, Epinosa, and Syratos. And Ragea was assigned to the southern imperial city of Danustica, as well as the nearby castles of Lavenia and Odrissa. She fought bravely to secure the Khuzaits' defeat, and she nearly got killed in the siege of Odrissa. So she deserves this castle more than anyone else. Well, not more than me, but I have more than enough. As for Sturgia's upper management, it was supposed to be shared between Olek and Vildur. And while the first of these guys had enough money to purchase the fiefs I've planned for him, the second could not afford the city of Balgard, so he was instead sold Fort Takor. He was supposed to patrol the choke point in between Balgard and Ov Castle, but he'll have to patrol the same area in between 2 castles now. In a way, Vildur is a special case as well. Maybe in time I'll give him dominion over Balgard for free. Finally, there's Batania, which was a special case in itself. You see, initially I wanted each of my compatriots to be sent to the 4 corners of the world to oversee each territory from an upper management position. But that was in direct conflict with my worldview of keeping each culture free from an outsider's rule, so these boys were kept in Batania, most of them in upper management positions. Lucian was allowed to keep Lanok Hen Castle and was given Maronath for free. Aaron kept the same fiefs he's had since joining me. Ergion's massive clan was given Carbanseth and Fort Pendraic, Kulharn was treated as a special case and received Druimore and Aster castles, while Aradweir drew the short end of the stick and could only afford to rule Flintolg Castle. Dunglanis was also available to be given to one of these last two guys, but none of them had any money, so I'd be the one collecting the tariff income from this city. And since we're talking about special cases, now would be a good time to list the clans that did not qualify for an upper management position but received preferential treatment nonetheless. Some of them, such as Akrum, Vildur, and Kulharn, were already mentioned, but there's a few Imperials I've not yet talked about. The most glaring example of a special case is Clan Neretes. Since I married one of their own, our family bond pushed me to return their lands surrounding Saneopa and Varagos Castle. The city of Onira was initially awarded to Belithor of the General Goods Store, but since he's done nothing special for our campaign, this city was taken from him. However, this is a large clan and I can't cram all of them into a castle. As such, Belithor was given 2 Imperial forts. As for the city of Onira, it was sold to Sanion of House Mestrikaros for the service he provided when I was advancing on the Kuzeets. He paid me a nice sum of money for the city of Varnovapol, which was shortly given to someone else, so he took one for the team and now he's been properly rewarded with his own city. But his clan is much smaller, so I can't also give him a castle. To be honest, by this point I was running out of castles to give in the Empire, because I had a lot of Imperial clans who were assigned to lower management positions. But the one who helped me the most, especially during the later stages of my campaign, was Disporion. If you remember, I kept him in my army, and as soon as the city was taken, he gave me money for it. Without his money, I could not afford to do these maneuvers, and as such, he deserves to be properly rewarded. The cities of Poros and Zeonica, as well as the castle in between, were gifted to Disporion. After all, I did promise to pay him back for all he's done for me. And that's pretty much how this land was distributed among my loyal vassals. This took a very long time and not everything was straightforward. So now I'm going to tell you how I've done it, but I'll try to keep it short. First of all, I had to summon clan leaders into my army while I was waiting in Ametatis. Some of them were already busy marching in other armies, which had to be disbanded if I were to call them to me. But other clan leaders weren't leading any party of their own and were instead chilling inside the walls of their city, so for those guys, such as Belithor, Olek and Misui, I had to travel to each city with all the other lords in tow. And I had to do this because, for example, Belithor was in possession of a Kuzeit castle, Usek, which I wanted to give to Mesui. Or, to give another example, Garios held the city of Kiaz, which was planned for Adas of the Saranids. So you can imagine how long it took for me to round up all the vassals to shape this continent in my image. But eventually it was done, and not only did I properly reward my vassals for their service, but now a big share of this land belonged to its rightful owner, me. And this reflects especially in my daily tax income. 131,000 dinars each and every day. Well, the exact number would fluctuate, but that's 3 times more than I was earning before I put the world in order. To be honest, I've also enacted several policies that would increase the amount of money I would receive, from a land tax on all of my vassals, to increased trade tariffs in towns. And to be fair, these policies do have a small impact on the prosperity of my nation, but I will disavow them in a few years, when I am sitting nicely at about 100 million dinars. If I wanted this money faster, I could buy the entirety of Calradia from my vassals and leave them with nothing, and earn 1 million per day, after which I would sell them back, but that takes too much work, so I'll have to take things slow. Whatever I do, this is my last official corporate report, so if I have anything more to share, it will be done via live broadcast. But we ain't done yet. You see, I did not narrate everything chronologically because it was a complete mess. I'd have jumped from one thing to another and it would have felt like the chaos never ended. So I have a few more things to share with you before I can close this report. You see, after I was done smithing in Ametatis, I set course for Onira, for reasons I already explained. But while I went there, I also passed through each of my cities and castles, invested money into their development, and most importantly, I took the cavalry from each garrison and into my own party. Once my party was filled, I sent my 2 siblings and 1 companion with their own detachments of horsemen to patrol my lands and catch any criminals or rebels they encounter. And thanks to their speed advantage, they can also quickly regroup with me if I call them into my army, shall I ever need it. And towards the conclusion of my never-ending phase of land redistribution, something interesting happened. King III passed away due to his old age, and in his stead, the Vlandians chose Belgir to be their new king. Which means Clan Damerok, one of the largest in the realm, is no longer a ruling clan. As you know, non-rulers can be invited into my corporation, so that was my next goal. But recruiting Alarie was no easy task, you see. He was imprisoned in Sargot, but for some unknown reason, I could not set him free, despite my supreme power. It would seem I'm not as omnipotent as I thought, so I would have to patiently wait for the king's son to either make his escape, or have his ransom paid. But I still had a few vassals to call to me, so I could patiently wait for Alarie to regain his freedom, and eventually, after a few days, he finally made it. But he teleported to the other side of the map in the city of Sironea, so I had to cross the continent and hope that he won't run into my vassals and get himself imprisoned again. Skipping all miscellaneous details, I arrived to that city and easily persuaded this lad to join my corporation. But because his clan is so large, he'll have to be assigned to an upper management position within Vlandia, and as such, Sargot and Talivel Castle were sold to him. He could afford it, he inherited the money from his father. And honestly, Damerok is such a large clan I would have happily given them an extra castle, but I didn't have any more to give. At least not any that were close to his new city. Recruiting this guy was mildly inconveniencing since I wanted no more than 2 clans in a territory's upper management, but unintentionally, things actually stayed true to the plan, because in the very first day of 1099, Engalther and his clan committed treason against Halcorp as he joined the Vlandian rebellion, taking with him the fiefs I graciously offered. As soon as I realized what was going on, I set course towards Prevent and passed through every settlement on my way there, recruiting whoever was available, and when I arrived at my destination, I also called for reinforcements, creating a huge reclamation army. And I wasn't the only one putting an army together to reclaim these lands. But I was hoping I wouldn't have to put this army to work, so I chased Engalther and made him the same offer I make all of my enemies. Join or die. It was hard for him not to accept my proposal, but he asked for more than 5 million dinars for property which was already mine. And, well, mercy is one thing, stupidity is another. If I took this deal, I'd have been the biggest joke on the continent. You know, I once read a fictional story about a lord nicknamed the Laughing Lion, who was too trusting and forgiving of his rivals, and they took advantage of him at every turn. That only ended on the day he died, as his son drowned his biggest rival along his entire family, setting an example for anyone who dared to oppose him. And so the rains we pour is whole, with not a soul to hear. You can probably guess what happened to Engalther. I was going to crush his army and have him executed for treason, but he did me the favor of dying on the battlefield. Spares me the negative reputation at least. As for the rest of his clan, I won't have them executed, but they will never be allowed into my organization ever again. And if I meet them in battle, I will ride out brandishing my javelins. The last thing left to do was reclaiming Prevent and Drapant Castle, but unlike in the previous episodes, I won't give any details about the battles because quite frankly, they weren't all that interesting. I constructed trebuchets, bombarded the fortifications for about a week, and once the walls were breached, my huge army swarmed the defenders and put them to the sword. And because I enjoy a good scrap, I gave my folks a taste of Vlandian blood. After all, this region was conquered peacefully. Now you may notice that I am not wearing my set of Imperial armor. That's because I thought it would be nice if I purchased armor pieces from all the towns I passed through, and try to wear one armor piece from each of the cultures I've conquered. So for this outfit I'm wearing a Khuzait helmet, an Imperial cape, a Vlandian chest piece, Sturgian gloves and Battanian boots. But I'm not wearing anything from the Aserai, so I wasn't really representing them at the time. And because I already have a Battanian sword, I was thinking to replace my boots with footwear of Aserai origin. But when I wanted to purchase those, I didn't find anything that looked good, so in the end, my multicultural attire included a Khuzait helm, Chalya's Imperial scale chest piece, Aserai shoulder guards, Vlandian mittens, and Sturgian boots. I'm not wearing any Battanian armor because my Falx represents my homeland well enough, and it has claimed many lives. Anyway, that was kind of a detour from the main subject of Vlandian rebellion, but to be honest, there's not much I can say about those battles that wasn't said in the previous chapters, so all you need to know from now on is that my choice of territorial distribution was a tactical one. You've seen how swiftly we dealt with Engalther's betrayal, and that would not have been possible if he owned one city in Vlandia, another one in the desert, and a castle in the steppe. But if a vassal's territory is focused in one small region, if he turns traitor, he can easily be dealt with and his land will be reclaimed by my organization. And to prevent further rebellion attempts, this is the unofficial policy we'll implement. If a clan defects to the enemy, their lands will be seized, the leader executed for treason, the clan itself shall never be welcomed back into our fold, and to ensure that others have a motivation not to follow in their footsteps, the remaining clans in the region shall have a claim to a portion of the traitor's territory. The other portion belongs to me. And if a conspiracy makes all my vassals turn on me at once, well, that's when I no longer care about PR and just start swinging my executioner's axe left and right until there's no opposition left. I truly hope it won't come to that. Anyway, once the rebellion was dealt with, I spent a couple more months wandering the world, purchasing the armor pieces I already talked about, investing into the development of each fief I passed through, and waiting for my vassals to show up so I can finish giving each of them a piece of land that they can be happy with. But we've already discussed those subjects, and in the end, Hallery took King Althor's place at the upper management of Landia. As for the cities I've taken back from the traitor, they were immediately sold to some of my vassals and then claimed by whoever had the most votes. They won't keep this land, I'm planning to buy it for myself, but for now, we are done. We're done, I can't believe it. For the first time in 15 years, there's nothing else that needs to be done. My checklist has been completed and the world is exactly the way I want it to be. Ironically, not much has changed for the continent except for the fact it's been united under my banner, because each territory has been returned to the same lords that used to rule them before I named myself Chairman of Calradia. Well, not exactly the same lords. Not all of them had the sense to join me. Some are still trying to lead their own peasant rebellions against my new world order, not out of a sense of duty to their homeland, but because they miss the good old days when they were free to pillage the countryside with no repercussions. But those days are over, and these rats are lucky if they can raid just one of my villages without getting captured by my vassals. Well, there's not much more to be said except thank you all for sticking with me throughout this series, and especially for doubling the population of Halcorp. When the Traitor Stories began, this channel just reached 5,000 subscribers and thanks to you, and now we're at more than 11,000. I hope my future content will prove itself worthy of this honor. But if I am to make any future content, I have to bring this video to an end, hard as it may seem. So thanks again for everything, and I hope to see you all next time. Goodbye.